Hello, hello. We are live. We are live. How are you today?
Good.
Good, good. Hello, everyone. I have Blake Woody with me here today. I'm Dr. Nova Bryant from When Pets Fly, and this is our veterinary air travel podcast. A little bit about myself before we get started. I'm Dr. Nova Bryant. I'm a veterinarian. I work in the airline industry, and I'm on staff with Delta Airlines. Been with them since 2018, and I love the role because it's giving me an insight on animal transportation with just your pets, other animals too, because FYI, Delta transports more than just personal pets. They transport could be day-old chicks hatching eggs, live tropical fish for conservation purposes. Between zoos, they transport smaller zoo animal species because it's a commercial aircraft. It's not a freighter. So, but we do a lot there. But like I said, with that experience, I learned a lot about animal transportation, and I share that information through on my platform with When Pets Fly, and then also through these podcasts that I've been doing for quite some time now. And on the podcast, I introduce different people that have, I always say, different stakeholders in the animal transportation industry. Last week we had someone, last 2 weeks, we had Derek Garrett from Zounds talking about how music can relieve anxiety in pets and preparing them for air travel that way. So we do a lot of things. But today, no different. We're going to have a repeat guest again. Blake Woody will be with us from Certify Canine. So Blake, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Blake Woody. I am the CEO and founder of Certify Canine. We, just for those that don't know who we are, we're a third-party risk mitigation company that does testing and certification for service, therapy, and facility dogs, which is a really fancy way of saying we make sure that dogs meet the minimum requirements on the service aspect for ADA, so public access and task-based verification. But then we also have kind of teeth in what we do, where we actually have a liability coverage that protects the handler and the dog in a truly service dog capacity, which is something that is not really seen. But we also do it for therapy and facility dogs too.
That's good. Well, I love what you're doing. And just to be more clear, because I asked you before we get started, a difference as far as insurance. What are you covering as far as insurance?
So what we cover is a general liability specifically for working dogs. Now we use the term working dogs with our insurance company because there's a lot of misunderstanding of what a working dog is. Is it a service dog? Is it a therapy dog? What about like search and rescue dogs? What about police canines? One of our goals down the road is to cover all different classifications of working dogs. But right now we're focusing on service and therapy dogs. So what that means is that there is into almost like I kind of joke that it's like car insurance. It's medical and property liability coverage. But the way that contracts are written right now, if you have a dog or you have a service dog and you have it under your homeowner's insurance, then that dog is seen under your like house and your property. But there's not a separate entity that protects you and your dog in that fact that you're in public and you're doing things wherever you are in public. And that's what we cover.
Well, give me an example of something, a situation where we definitely good where a person has this type of liability insurance.
So it's more for the what if case. And it's also kind of really helps with the legal beagles is what kind of one of my investors kind of jokes about that. When you're in hospitals, when you're in schools, when you're in places of like, for example, if we look at therapy dogs, where it is a vulnerable population, you want to have some type of liability coverage to ensure that if an accident occurs, this is a living, breathing, consenting creature. If something happens, that all parties are protected. And then from the service dog perspective, service dogs can go just about everywhere in public. So if something were to arise, whether that dog got hurt or the dog caused a disturbance, which caused someone to get knocked over, all of those things are covered in that liability coverage. Now, the whole point of us having this insurance, truly and honestly, was we wanted teeth. We wanted something that held accountability for service dogs and therapy dogs, because what it comes down to is we can test what public access looks like, how is your dog trained for tasks, and what task does it do for you. But where's the accountability? Where's the weight that holds it? And so that's where that insurance piece not only protects like businesses and airlines and things along those lines, like mindset of, hey, there is actually coverage here. It also protects the handler so that there is, you just have that safety net.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's back up a little bit as far as the difference with working dogs and service dogs. let's get a little education here, because I think, to be honest with you, I do know that there's misconception on what a true service dog is, what people think they are. But give us a little lesson here, so everyone will be clear on the differences with them. Because again, we've got the service dogs. We do have emotional support dogs. I guess there's also the psychiatric service dogs. Oh wait, therapy dogs. So yeah, have at it, please.
So good question. It's one of the most common ones we get. So there are service dogs that are covered under ADA protection. So they are calm and manageable in public, and then they're trained to mitigate a disability through a task. And it's specifically mitigating a disability through a task. And it can be, there's no size restrictions. There's no, it can only be a dog between 10 and 20 pounds. Like it can be any range of any dog. Emotional support dogs, the term really got coined, I wouldn't say in the early 2000s, where they're not service dogs, but they're dogs that help in some type of emotional capacity. So you see them in the Fair Housing Act for homes and apartments, that this dog is critical for this person's health, and that they do not have ADA permissions. Like they're not allowed to go into hospitals or restaurants or stores, but they can live with you because they do support you if you request it with like an apartment complex. That's what an ESA, an emotional support dog, does. Therapy or facility dogs are dogs that get to love on people. So therapy dogs you most often see in like schools, elderly retirement homes. You can also see them in hospitals. So those dogs are truly doing what dogs do best. They love on people, but they're trained to be calm and to be able to handle some of that unpredictability of our world. Now, facility dogs, why I distinguish between therapy and facility dogs, is facility dogs are therapy dogs kind of on steroids, is what I like to joke. They're dogs that are trained for very specific environments. So, for example, it could be a facility dog at a children's hospital, a dog that's allowed to actually go into certain procedures because they've been trained with the beeping of the noises and allowed to overhang things and the chaos of that could happen. But the dog is there for the child. And usually it's an employee. You also see it in call centers or like emergency services. They will have facility dogs that are trained to be in those certain types of stressful situations. Again, these dogs don't have ADA protections, but they are given permissions due to what context they're working.
So as far as the insurance that you're doing, it will cover for all of that you mentioned?
It covers for service, therapy, and facility. We don't cover emotional support dogs. It is a really good question that we get asked often. Well, why don't you cover it? And really what it comes down to is the distinction of the dogs being in public and being able to have that public access to us. Right. That's really what we're looking for. And a lot of times what I do tell people with ESAs is that if your dog is providing you such emotional support, it is worth a conversation with your doctor and with potentially a service dog trainer to see if your dog actually could be a service dog. Psychiatric, the invisible illnesses is one of the most underrated things that service dogs can actually support with, because they can not only smell our body changes, but they can also help us on that human animal bond.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I can see the difference with the emergent, again, the ESAN is more individual. It seems like the other ones, even though service dogs are individual for an individual as well, they're task trained for ADA, a person with ADA disability, and the others, therapy or facility dogs, still they're trained to a certain extent for that environment that they're in and everything. So I definitely see the difference. But the thing is, what do you think? I mean, I'll be honest, when I think about air travel, and I know a lot of folks go to the airport and they see all these different types of service, so-called service dogs. They have the vests on and everything. They go, but you look at some of them after a while and you're like, I don't know if that's a service dog. Let me tell you a funny story. It's not funny, but, and I didn't laugh in the moment. I only laughed after the fact when I was thinking about it. But my son and I were at a veterinary conference a month back. And this gentleman came in with a French bulldog, had a service vest on, and the dog was off leash. And he said it was his service dog. And I was, we were planning on maybe getting some content, maybe asking him a few questions. And before we did that, the dog spotted another dog across the hall and clocked eyes and shot off after him. I mean, he was full speed running after him. And if you've ever seen a French bulldog run and how they kick their legs out, I can't believe I didn't laugh at the time. I was just shocked. I think we're all shocked that this happened. And the gentleman was running, trying to grab the dog. And luckily he caught him in time because his little service French dog was about to attack and got him under control. I said, sir, well, you know what? hey, let me talk to you at another time and everything. And he was like, no, no, it's okay. He's never done this before. And part of me say, we interviewed him, and part of your mind says that couldn't have been a true service dog, but it could have been a service dog. It's just that environment could have been a little bit too much stimulation for him. I mean, I was asking him, I said, sir, where's his leash? He says, oh, I left it in the car. I was like, I think you need to get his leash. Now, a true service dog, maybe one-on-one, he's perfectly fine at home, but maybe he wasn't trained for that environment. And I'm wondering if we're also seeing that sometimes in the airport. They could be service dogs one-on-one and do great, but that environment could be so stimulating or stressful for them that they just break character. So when you're in the airport and you see sometimes a dog that has a service dog vest, and you say that can't be a service dog based upon the behavior, you have to also think that environment maybe needs to be retrained. Or then there's our times where you're like, it's impossible that this is a service dog because he's trying to eat food, he's jumping on everybody, he's doing everything. So either way, I think there's a awareness that needs to be out there. I think a lot of pet owners need to understand what a true service dog is, what they're supposed to be doing, and the behavior they're showing also impact things. So what are your thoughts on that? Frozen. Lordy.
There we go.
You got me? Okay.
Yeah.
Got me scared. I was like, Lordy. Like I'm talking to myself. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I swear, and it's only from the story I just mentioned. It's only like later on that day I was relaxing and it came to my head and I started cracking up laughing. I was like, that was the funniest thing I've ever seen, that funniest reaction. But yeah. Oh no, she's frozen. You okay? Oh no. Hello? You there? I see you.
Hi. Yep, I'm here.
Okay, we're good. Frozen on my side. Was I frozen for you? Uh-oh. Again.
Are we maybe?
I see you. I think so.
There we go.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I hear you now.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
So you were asking about, yes, good. So you were asking about airports and when you see a dog that you just don't know if it's a service dog or not. What was what were you asking for, a question or opinion on it?
Just your thoughts on it. I mean, everyone, sometimes we come in our mind and decide, is that true or not, and everything. And again, that environment is stressful. So it makes you question sometimes if the validity of these cases.
So what it comes down to is like one of the things that we teach in Certify Canine, but also what we tell our handlers is that it's handlers' discretion. So when we have service dogs in general, when we live our lives, there's, a collection of places that you go consistently. So your dog learns like to navigate, the grocery store, Home Depot, work, things like that. But doing something outside of the norm, such as an airport, such as you see it a lot with like Disneyland, adventures, like the theme parks, these big scary things, unless the dog has been trained in those environments, it's not going to know what to do. And what's difficult is that a lot of the owner trained handlers or handlers that come from programs that can maintain behaviors or maintain expectations with them, it's a lot. It's hard. And most people, it's the assumption, right? It's like not to put everything in a car analogy, but that's essentially, a dog is something that can cause a lot of damage, like a car can. Yeah. So if you get in your car and you're like, I don't need to put my seatbelt on when I go to the grocery store, it's 5 minutes down the street. But then you get in a car accident, it's I should have probably put my seatbelt on. Same thing with the service dog or working dog in public. Like you do need to make sure that your dog is manageable and under control. You will see a lot of times too, where most people think that they're never going to run into a dog, like when they're traveling, which is surprising because when I do a test almost every week at Phoenix Sky Harbor for service dog training, and I legitimately see anywhere from 5 to 15 dogs within a 2-hour time span every week. Wow. And it's random, but it's so many animals. And you can see the people that are like, yep, no good. My dog's good. Like they don't have a care in the world. And then you see the dogs that like owners are grabbing their dog's muzzles, like, shh, don't bark.
Right. Right.
Because it's the inaccessibility of pet travel and the difficulty of people really understanding what neutrality is. I have a lot of thoughts, and I think the service dog community too has a lot of opinions on it. And you'll see the range of like, people are like, it's positive, like it's practice, let's keep going. And you see people are like, they need to be all kicked out. The biggest thing that most handlers, me as personally as an individual handler, is I just want to give space to other dogs. You know, technically by law, you do not need to have a vest. You do not need to have identification. Right. So any dog that you see technically could be a working animal, but you know, that animal is going to show those calm signals. And even if a dog is over threshold, animals are going to make mistakes. Service dogs make mistakes all the time. It's more about how they redirect and how they communicate with their handler. So one of the biggest differences between like foundationally trained service dogs versus owner trained service dogs is foundationally trained service dogs, why they have such a like washout rate. If you hear like, oh, if they have 10 puppies, only 2 are going to make it. The reason why it's so high is because they have to make this dog quite literally like bomb proof across the board, so that whoever the dog does match with, their success rate still is really high, because they're looking for such a high quality of behaviors. I think it's fabulous for foundationally trained dogs, but the demand of what is needed, there's no foundation that's going to provide enough of that. But on the owner train aspect, you know, there's so many amazing owner trained service dogs that can do the job and the work and be in public, but it's the practice and it's the right education and it's the right like learning. Like most of the time when I'm out with a dog, it's teaching people around me what 2 questions can you ask and how to do it. And most businesses are terrified of causing a scene, causing an issue, kicking someone out.
I think that's the reason why these traveling and through the airport, and you see these things in the different airline companies, is because everyone's so afraid of, number one, probably getting sued by asking the wrong questions, but there's definitely 2 questions you can ask. And with them, really, you're looking for the behavior of the dog, not necessarily, you know, of course, you never say, what's your disability, which would be crazy. Yeah, you get sued on something like that. But there's 2 distinct questions you can ask, and really the response is really about the dog more than anything, you know. But everyone gets so afraid to ask and everything. But I think that's the reason why a lot of people get through with it. And then also, I'm sure you've seen on these things, people act crazy when they're traveling. It was like the extreme they go through traveling, and they just feeling like they're entitled to fly. And I bought my ticket, I'm going to be on this aircraft. It's like, whoa, you're not entitled to anything. And I think that's put a lot of fear in folks of saying, if I say this, and their confrontation and just make it easier, you know what, just let them go kind of thing. But they don't realize the impact they're having on the true service dog teams when they allow the ones who are committing fraud to come through the system and everything. So, yeah.
So what's interesting with social media is that you see the rise of like the personal influencer, but you also see the rise of the individual experience much more. So it becomes more prevalent. So for example, there's a TikTok nurse, Jen Hamilton, who wide range of just personal life and nursing and stuff like that, has nothing to do with service dogs. She was on a flight with a service dog, like literally got to sit next to one, and they were chatting a little bit. And another person came on with their service dog, and the dog starts growling and lunging at the dog. And they're demanding that this other person needs to leave. And they're like, my dog's a guide dog. Like, I am partially blind. Like, this isn't what are you doing? And everyone blew up on it. And it's look, like I flew to a conference in December, and it was the first time this dog was flying with me, the service dog. And she was going to the conference to show what a dog should look like and act like. And like, I was a little nervous. I'm always nervous the first flight with any service dog because it's the unknown. It's a training situation. Like, you can't be like, okay, I'm going to book a flight and like, you know, here we go. Flights are expensive, unfortunately, nowadays, especially with the fuel cost. So a dog might not get to fly often. And so it's more of like, okay, well, can you handle everything else but the actual plane itself? There's ways to train and test for it, but it's about compromise. It's about education. It's about compassion. I think that's the biggest thing in this world is we need compassion. And most people, dogs are our mirrors. from a pet perspective to a working perspective. Dogs will show us how we're feeling internally, and airports and in travel are extremely stressful.
Extremely
So when we're
stressful.
stressed out, your dog should honestly turn to you and say, hey, it's cool, I'm here, no big deal, instead
Yeah,
of
calm
going,
down.
who's the threat, what do I need to do? And that's
Right.
the difference.
Well,
But
yeah,
your dog,
that's where you're gonna see the difference. A true service dog is gonna be at least mellow behavior. The other ones will show their behavior and everything. So you got to be mindful of that. But again, when it all boils down to really, it's the behavior of that your dog in those environments that they're looking at. And again, you said the service animal vest does not mean a thing necessarily because they don't even have to have it on. So yeah, it's
well,
telling the
that's where
same thing.
we're trying to, like, I had clients that flew with another airline, and they got denied at
Yeah,
the ticketing gate because her dog is a very traditional, what you would see being passed off as a service dog. I joke that it's a little white floof. And she is a 10-pound little floof ball. But she's been trained to do task verification. She's that small because that's what fits mom's lifestyle and
right,
size. And like the ticketing counter had no idea their own policies, where I was like screenshotting her, like, hey, this is on their website, show them
right.
this like clause. But I think it's the scramble of, well, how do you reinforce it? And the problem is that there's never, in the disability community, there is a big conversation of, should there be a regulatory agency? Should there be something that you
Yeah,
send documentation on and get a license, kind of like a car? And a lot of people, some think it's a great idea and would solve a lot of this issue. And other people think it's going to remove accessibility. Like, some of the biggest things that I get when I talk about this on social media is I get a lot of hate from a good amount of people because they're like, you're reducing access. You're not allowing everyone to have the opportunity for this. Like, why are you causing more steps to go through? And it is a valid question. It is a valid concern. And there's no right answer. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying, is the
right.
biggest focus we have.
Yeah, that makes it difficult when it's not, because it's just kind of almost wide open in a sense. And that's why, again, because it's so wide open and not in a sense regulated, that's why people can do and basically fraud to get through the system and everything. So if they standardize it, it would be better in a way. But I'll be honest, I haven't looked into it further as far as accessibility. So I guess that is something to consider with it.
Yeah, it's a hard question. And that's where, like, we've made a big shift this past year in doing, going to businesses and saying, hey, if you're interested in us being an internal process or even a partner with you, to where it's like, I don't mean to keep bringing up like the airport, but when you go through TSA, especially with all the TSA shutdowns right now, like, if you have Clear, you get to bypass some of those TSA lines. And Clear is like, you're signing up for yourself for this special service, and it gets you through it faster. So like, we've been kind of talking of like, we're kind of like a Clear for service dogs, where you know that you've done the due diligence, you know that there is a coverage, you've been verified, and it gives peace of mind to the other companies. Like, that's honestly, at the end of the day, what's the biggest concern is like, how can we verify?
That's good. Guess what? I've kind of shifted this past year too, as far as how I'm interacting. Because I initially started out, I felt like I was doing more for the pet owner, trying to focus on that level. But the reality is, when it comes to what I do as far as pet travel education or pet-centered travel education, it's better for me to connect at the veterinary level and trickle it down to the pet owner. So I've changed it more to B2B instead of B2C as far as the customer. So same thing with you. I think you will have more of an impact if you at the business level and trickle down to the service animal teams or the working dog teams, basically.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that the hardest part about, I would say, like, this business is that it's getting into the room of the right people. Because when you talk about, you're a service dog certification company, everyone's like, yeah. Like, you can go online and like register your phone as a service animal. I'm like, no, we actually have liability insurance. Like, no, like, we have this testing process. So
Right.
It's just education. It's that early adopters and finding your early adopters. And
Yeah.
I mean, this has been something that's been in the works for almost 15 years for me personally. And so
That's
we've
awesome.
been publicly as a company for 2 years, and it's been absolutely ridiculous the past 2 years of what has happened and what's the integration that people are really looking for.
Well, explain, for those who don't know, explain the certification program that you have too.
Yeah, so our certification is available in person, but also online, which is something that's different. So if you're in a place where there is no certifier, you can actually upload and submit your information digitally. And so what we do is we require 2 public access tests. So 2 different environments that we have like a how-to filming guide. Of what you need to show that your dog can do these behaviors. It's similar to like a canine good citizen test. However, there's certain things that we're looking for. So like your dog loading in and out of a car calmly, walking into a store, walking onto a sidewalk, walking past a busy street, walking and navigating through a busy store, doing your sit down stay. Can you do a recall safely? Can you do a stay safely? There's a couple other things that we look for. And then once you've filmed 2 different locations, and we give a couple recommendations of locations to do. So a department store, a Home Depot, a farmer's market, a malls, even an airport. We have to see 2 different escalating behavior or like situation environments. Once they're uploaded, then they're evaluated by service dog trainers. So people that have done the service dog training and animal training for over 8 years or over 10 years. And it's where there's 2 of us that do every single test. So it's not individual bias. Once we see it, we also look for body language on those videos. We look at the handler's language with the videos. How are they navigating the world easily together? Once we have those 2 tests done, then if they're a service dog, they will fill out a task-based verification form. So basically this is a form where they're not disclosing their HIPAA, their diagnosis. We have some HIPAA guidelines that we talk about in our program. But we do ask that they write what tasks is their dog trained to do. Is it a nose bump, a scent alert, and how we're looking for specifics of like my dog puts its nose on my knee. And we have a couple examples for people to help fill that out. Because truthfully, that's how we distinguish, can the dog do the task? Can the dog follow through with the task? Because a lot of times you'll hear, oh, they do grounding behavior. And you're like, well, what's your grounding?
What does that mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Is it a lean? Is it my body sits on you? Is it my chest sits on you? Like, what is it? Because people are pretty savvy in figuring out how to pass themselves off as, oh, this is what my dog really can do. But once we can see that and verify it, then we do require health vaccines. We have a letter from a vet that the dog is healthy and can perform the service. We want to make sure that the dog, its safety and its health is taken into consideration. And once they upload all that, then they have a test, an ADA test that basically it's again, like to joke that it's a driver's test. Do you understand the rules of the road? Do you understand the law behind ADA? Everyone is required to take this test in this organization. And then once they've been passed, then they get their identification number, they get their insurance number, and we welcome them to the team. But our therapy dogs that go through the testing for therapy work have a different component. Instead of the task-based verification, they do a human temperament test. So how does their dog do with being touched, being loved, being handled? How does their body language look? We do that test for them instead.
That's perfect. That's perfect. We put them through a lot for the certification, which is good. You know, this isn't your simple little thing online. Fill out something and we'll give you the certification. This is a legitimate service that you're providing. So that's awesome. Very, very
we
good.
want to make sure that there's and we've said no to people. We've said, hey, work on these few things and then come back on us. Because there is a standard that we need to hold for safety of them, but also safety of other dogs in public. And that's hard. You know, you never want to be denied something in that capacity. So that's where we have retesting rules. We have things like that because we want them to, ideally, we want dogs to be everywhere in public, but it's how do they respond to it?
I'm glad you brought up retesting because I was just thinking about retesting to myself because there are times when, again, it could be a legitimate service dog and something happens. Actually, something that folks don't realize that have the fraudulent ones, they can do something to impact the true service dog that can really impact its ability to do the job that he's supposed to be doing. And then they have to be retrained and everything. So that's another reason why don't do that, because you're impacting the true service animal dog, team. This dog now might have to be retrained. So my thought is, do you often have recertifications, or is there something in particular that maybe a person that has a service or working dog where it's obviously they need to be retrained? Is there anything that you could indicate that way?
So If an incident occurs, we ask our members to let us know so that we can make sure that their dog is still sound. But we internally require, after your first year of being with us, to do a retest. You have to go through the recertification process. And then after that, it's every 2 years because life happens, dogs get older, things occur. That's what we require for our members. But I mean, unfortunately, it's not uncommon. There's a client that I'm working with from a training perspective that her dog got attacked. And so now her dog is very reactive on leash, and this dog, she's dependent on this dog. And so it's okay, let's take a step back. How do we recondition? How do we help this dog build confidence again? Because at the end of the day, that's what the dog needs to have, is that individual confidence. And it's kind of like a car accident. You never know when it's going to happen. And usually it's not your fault when it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. And I like also that you mentioned within there's a veterinary aspect also too, is making sure the dogs are current on vaccines and everything, which is perfect because there's a lot of, I know there's a lot of instances where traveling, especially internationally, some of the rules and regulations of going to these various countries or even coming back to the US, they assume that service dogs are exempt. And like, why would they be exempt of disease, vaccine preventable diseases or the need for them when traveling? Because you don't want them to get exposed. I mean, you need them. You don't want them to get ill. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I really appreciate that you do that.
Yeah. So I love the global pet travel organizations and companies that support that because there's so many regulations that like I have to look like, what is it again? What is this? Yeah. No, dogs do need zoonotic diseases are a very serious issue. And I think most pet owners don't realize it. I mean, just even in the US, West versus East Coast, leptospirosis isn't necessarily the biggest deal in some parts of the country. In other parts, it is very serious. And people are like, what did you say? Like, what was that? So yes, I highly, highly recommend it from like a European transport, like passport that dogs need to have. It's just the information and finding the information. And in Europe, you see different countries have different rules for service dogs or have different qualifications for service dogs. And like Canada does require a public access test through the municipality. So they do require that, it's basically it's a test through a public space. And it's what we test for our public access. Once you have that, then you're good to go with the municipality. Like that is fantastic. It's getting the baseline of behavior. So from a European perspective, yeah, or a world perspective, absolutely. But I would say the breed bans have been a difficult issue that with some of our clients. Like we have a couple bully breeds that would love to go to France or would love to go to Sweden and they can't because they're on the banned list. So that's where what do we do then?
Right. And just to reiterate, when you're traveling with as we're saying for service dogs, as far as the ruling behind it, there's no specific breed. So it could be any. So when you're traveling, traveling in the US is not a big deal, but when you leave in the country, going to different parts of Europe, they do ban certain breeds that they deem as being dangerous. And if your service dog is that, it's going to be, I think they put you through a lot to get them through there. I think they needed, if I remember correctly, they needed to know exactly as far as if it's a pity mix, they wanted to know DNA testing. I know someone that had to do DNA testing to really define exactly the breed for that their dog, which was amazing. So but they do pay more attention to all that traveling internationally. But again, even if you have a service dog and you're traveling, they have to meet the requirements of that destination country. And don't forget, coming back to the US, you have to meet, it may sound crazy to you, it is a US dog, but he has to meet the requirements to come back to the country. And if you're in a high rabies risk country, it will be difficult for them to come back if you don't comply. They'll have to be probably in quarantine upon arrival, and you'll be without your service dog, which you don't want to be without. So pay attention to all that. It's really important. Really important.
It's extremely important. And it's also the culture of dogs is very different in different countries, where you'll see a ton of street dogs, but no one pays attention to them. No one touches them. No one says hi. Here in America, we are very dog heavy, very dog focused. Anytime someone sees a dog, we're like, oh, it's a puppy, and there's this unspoken, I can touch it, and no, you can't, not always. And in Europe, there's a very strong, you ignore everything around you to an extent,
Right.
or you acknowledge it in a different capacity. And that, like, I think us as in the US could take some notes from that culture, because their dog bites, their dog history is a lot. There's different statistics.
Yeah, from my experience being with CDC years ago, there's a lot of folks that go on vacation and see stray dogs, puppies, and think, hey, make a friend and want to bring it back to the country, not knowing anything about it. The potential of diseases. I mean, I trust me, I'm a true dog lover, but I know diseases, and I'm like, you ain't giving me rabies, I'm not touching you. I'm just very fearful because I know the diseases you can get from them, and sometimes it's more just rabies. You got the lepto, going brain fart right now, but there's other zoonotic diseases that they can give you. So you've got to be careful when you see stray dogs just wandering by themselves. And then if you say, and also consider if you're traveling with your dog in period, the interaction they have with them, you've got to be careful of that. Your dog may be vaccinated for diseases that are common in the US, but what's in that destination or that country you're going to, they may not be. And here there's a potential exposure. So no, keep them away, and watch what you're doing when you're traveling with your pet, basically.
Yeah, it's there's so much unknown in this industry, unfortunately. And it's all regulation, it's who wants to take ownership of it and who's going to tell people yes or no. And, there's a lot of people don't want to be told what to do.
Well, look, I always say US, you don't tell people what to do in the US. People do not like being told what to do, but in things that we're saying here, though, there's so many reasons why that you have to be careful as far as diseases and everything that you don't want to get. And as far as also, like I said, interaction, true service dog teams, there's reasons why people say, want to protect, and there's rules behind certain things. There's reasons for them, so that people need to acknowledge them and stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I want to also talk about too, before, because time is going. I definitely want to talk about service. And again, I know you do more than just say work other dogs too, but I'm still on service dog, sorry. But service dog etiquette, and that's really important to me, because I had a coworker that had and I don't know, I think it was a service dog. She brought him in, and she would complain that folks would pet her dog without asking, all these different things, and the service dog, and then she just worried about retraining. So I do understand it is probably legitimate, because it was there, and maybe people thought of it as more as being, as you're saying, more of a therapy dog or a facility dog, but it was her service dog, and she was quite offended when people pet her dog and stuff. But there needs to be service dog etiquette. There should be a ruling behind, if you see them, speak to the owner. So what are your thoughts on that?
100%. Like, most, especially here in the US, most people, when they see a dog, they're going to go, oh, it's a doggy. And if they see it with booties on, then you should, oh, it's wearing shoes. It's so cute.
Yes.
And most handlers, truly and honestly, especially the younger handlers, will actually dye their dogs. Like, I've seen dogs that have like rainbow tails and, fun goggles. And like, there's a dog that goes to Disneyland often on social media, and he wears like little Mickey ears. Like, you can definitely do that with your service dog, but it brings attention to you. And so, like, any handler that comes to us, we have to tell them, like, you're going to get attention, even though that's the last thing you want, because there is this unspoken thing within the American society of, like, we can say hi to whatever dog we want to. And the biggest etiquette that we can say is you have to ignore the dog. You have to ignore what you see. You can, like, side glance, because look, we all know, like, if your dog's cute, especially like the more unusual service dogs, people love looking at them. We know it's how, like most handlers love their dog just as much as you might love seeing them in public. So, like, we get it, but it's at the same time, you got to let them do their work. And most handlers, truly, if you are polite and if you are kind and say, hey, I love what you're doing, is it possible to say hi? I don't want to interrupt you. Most handlers will be like, yeah, like, go say it, and give the cue for that. Go say a hi, or no, we're working right now, but thank you. Right. You'll have those interactions. Like, I've had little kids be like, oh, it's a doggy. And the parents be like, it's working. You can't say hi to it. You have to do it. And I've turned around and said, would you like to say hi? And they're like, oh, it's that is awesome, because people are polite. Like, kindness goes a long way, but it's the people that demand, well, I'm supposed to pet your dog. Or your dog is disgusting. Why is it I had this happen 2 weeks ago. Someone was like, oh, it's so disgusting. A dog in the store. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Like,
No,
what do I do with this? How do you handle that interaction? So service dog etiquette is huge. Biggest thing I would recommend is just ignore the dog. Ignore the dog, ignore the human. If you have questions, you can go find a manager, or you can politely ask that, hey, do you mind if I ask you a quick question?
right.
If you're trying to negotiate, hey, is your dog supposed to be here? Go find a manager that works at the store. Go find someone at the store instead of the individual.
Right.
But yeah, most, I get barked at. We service handlers get whistled and come here, puppy, all the time. And that's what we train the dogs to ignore. Like, you actually have to train the dog to be like, la, 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 I don't see you.
Look, like I said, they're trained to ignore. Now the next step is getting people to ignore it also. Because again, it's your service animal. They're doing a service for you, and they have to ignore it. It's not a pet. It's not something you just go up to and do that. And I can understand for little kids to understand it, but education as far as the parents with them needs to happen, and they need to just understand there's a job for them to do. And
I would say in the past 10 years, it has gotten, the public has become much more easier to navigate with a service dog. The education, the exposure, social media has helped in that capacity. But I also will have to say that I have seen, not to stereotype anyone, but I've seen some of the older generation start demanding that their dogs can be in public or ride in their wheelchairs with them when they have no business being there. And so or they demand to get attention like they want. So, there's a point of, there's a lot of really positive things happening in the world, but also at the same time, you still get those negative situations, unfortunately.
Definitely. Well, we're almost set for today. I think we covered a lot of stuff. Anything further you want to tell us? Anything, future plans for Certified Canine?
Right now our goal is to just exposure and having people see us. We are connected to some hospitals in the Midwest and in the Southwest, and we're working on opening that up more. If you're interested in working with service dogs for certification purposes, or how to verify from an employee perspective, we're here as that resource. So we're happy to educate, we're happy to support people, and that's really what our goal is.
That's perfect. Well, I love it. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today and just catching us up to speed and just having this conversation around service animals and everything. So I really appreciate it, Blake. So thank you so much. We'll have you back again, because I'm sure next year you'll give us some updates on new things that you're doing and how you're progressing with everything. So I appreciate that. Definitely appreciate it. Any final words?
Thank you for having me. Final words. Look, I think everyone has the opportunity for their dog to be a service dog, whether it's foundation or owner train perspective. And it's just making sure that you're doing your due diligence, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. It's that common courtesy. So we're here to support.
Perfect. Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I think we have maybe a couple weeks off again. We'll be back with you. But thank you, Blake, for being with us for Certified Canine. And thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Don't leave. Don't